Welcome to Cultivate Leadership Project. I am your host, Sam Esquivel. You're listening to episode 50, and I'm so excited. Leadership is so important. Developing leaders, to me, I just feel like, man, if you can help a young person or someone who isn't confident to become a leader, you can change their path. But the best way to pass knowledge is through knowledge. And so today I have one of my great friends, Jonathan Ramos. I'll introduce you in a minute. Just hang tight. He's a great leader. I've seen him develop for many years back when we first became friends. He's executive pastor at Refuge Church. It's here in Fort Worth, Texas. I'll put the link and website and everything underneath in the description. And so you might hear me and John just kind of laugh a little more than normal, but this is serious business here. This is serious business. But I'm so excited. Jonathan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Sam. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I really am honored and appreciate it. I'm so proud of everything that you're doing, Sam. So, I'm just glad to be here.
There's a phrase that I like to say to people when they're doing a good job or they're overseeing something, especially when they're leaders, and that is, I see you. And I see you, you know what I mean? And so everyone that's listening, Jonathan is my pastor. He's executive pastor here. And and then our lead pastor, Pastor Carlos, is also here at Refuge, but I'll be referring to you as John and Jonathan throughout this episode. But he leads here at church. Well, how big is the church?
Right.
Like estimate,
Or anywhere between 700 to 800. That's our Sunday attendance. Now that's including everything. That's the kids, the babies, everything. But that's where we're about at right now. As far as membership, you're looking at anywhere from 300 to 400.
That's a lot of people, and they got to get managed, right? You got to organize, you got to get volunteers, you have to plan events. Everyone, it's so crazy. We come to events, whether they're church or city or nonprofit type events, and we're like, oh, this is nice, but you don't see the work that goes beforehand. And that's where you come in, right? You've been planning and developing, bringing in new systems and processes, things that really make an organization work. And it takes time and it's difficult, right? I've seen you do it easily, but then I've also seen where you're like, man, this is a bit more complicated. The learning curve is longer, but you stepped up quite well. You know what I mean? Whenever I talk about you, I say that you're a leader. And I mean it 100%. And so I'm saying that if you are a leader, you got to have influence, right? Like people are going to be able to tell. And so, John, I see you.
Thank you.
And along with me and my wife, we know what you're doing. And so thank you. Every time I interview someone, I go through the 9 keys. Yeah. So Cultivate Leadership Project was developed from my story, from my walk in life. And each of these 9 keys kind of relate to how I grew up and the struggles that I went through and how I overcame them. And so that's why I have them. But as I'm developing CLP and it's growing, I love to hear their stories, right? You're like where you find yourself and where you're leading your organization and how they relate to each of these 9 keys. So we're just going to go through them and just whatever pops in your head, whether you want to tell your story of how, the journey to get here, or you can just say, well, last week, something popped up and it relates to that key. No big deal. We're going to just imagine a young person listening to you that thinks, am I a leader? Am I not a leader? You might remove some of that fear, or you might help them just take that next step and say, you know what? I am going to organize a food drive or a sock drive, you name it, right? So that's what we're doing here. So here we go. The 9 keys of a great leader. This is on our website, obviously. You can go to CultivateLeadershipProject.org, and you can see each of those 9 keys. And we're going to start with number 1. It's my favorite one. It seems like every leader has plenty to share here. Turning negatives into positives. Okay, before you jump in, I'm just going to give you a little parameter, and that's this. There's a lot of people that deal with negative things, and those negative things have more power than positives. So that's what determines their behavior and their actions, and I want to break that, right? So looking back at your experience or your upbringing, what's a negative that you have turned into a positive?
Well, I definitely would say that something that is how I viewed myself, right? I definitely didn't categorize myself as a person of influence. I didn't categorize myself as a leadership necessarily material. And the desires of my heart were for acceptance and inclusion. And so that, as leaders, I've always known from the beginning that leaders, they can be loners because they're leading. They're leading out front. So it wasn't ever really something that I was pursuing, like, oh, I want to be the leader, those kind of things. And I actually, there was a struggle in my life to become that, because where I reside most, or where I'm most comfortable, is when I feel like I'm part of the group, and I feel accepted, I feel wanted, those kind of things. And that's just my personal nature. And so, so I had to, I didn't believe in myself so much. And so that was definitely something that was a negative on my part. But I know that through my time with God, my time with spending with the Lord, and just the positive reinforcements around me, as far as my family and those that are, that love me, my parents, my brothers, they were able to help me to turn that negative idea about myself into something positive, and in turn allowed me to become a person of influence,
Yeah.
And so, and I'll say this, I'll say that, negatives are always opportunities that we can turn into something great, and so I always say that people could do it, then they wouldn't have called you, you are the person that is necessary for that moment, because of something that they feel is negative, that they can't accomplish or they can't turn around. And so that's why you're there. And God knows. That's why he called you. That's why you're there. And a lot of times we don't see that. We want to see our negativity or our negatives. And but the truth is that there's so much positive oozing out of you. The reason God put you there, and we just gotta see it and notice it and capitalize on that, because it's an opportunity.
It seems like before you step into your leadership calling, the negatives are very loud, and the results of them are very visual.
Yeah.
Then when you become a leader, people are like, oh, they never have problems. Everything's always good.
Yeah.
Tell me about your leadership right now and how you balance that, because I get a positive vibe from you, man. Because I know that you're leading, and you have to set the tone.
Yeah.
So what's that like? Like, is it that you're suppressing it or hiding it, or is it a management thing? How would you see that?
I would say it's more of seeing through it.
Yeah.
So like, for example, like there's times where you might encounter somebody that's irate. You might be working at a store, and there's an irate customer, and they're mad and they're irate, and they're throwing their arms around, or maybe saying bad things. And so, but a lot of times they're upset, but it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with the product. It has everything to do with either how they were treated, how they felt, or maybe how they have the lack of maybe the finances to purchase, or whatever the case may be. They felt misled. And so you have to weed through that. You have to see through it to be able to deal with the real issue. And so in leadership, it's the same way. There's going to be these negatives that come your way. It might be from, somebody telling, oh, well, you can't do that, or, cause restrictions, or give you like, oh, that's never going to work, and those kind of things. But you got to see through it. You got to say, where is this coming from? What is really happening here? And because a lot of those things, they actually 99% of the time when people are telling you something, it's usually not where they're trying to attack you or to bring you down. They're usually trying to help, but just don't know how to do it in a positive way. They're just saying it how it comes out of them, and they might not be feeling good in that moment, so it comes out in a little bit of negative way. But if you take it personally in a negative way, then it will affect you. But if you can see through it and see it for what it's worth, then you're able to use that and say, wow, that's a good comment. That's a good, a point of view. I can use that to leverage something, or to make a different, contribute to my educated decision. Mm-hmm. And so like, you got to be able to see through things. And that's, as a leader, that has to be a skill set. That has to be something that you develop. You don't take things personal. You always take a step back. I remember when you play baseball and you're in the outfield, your first step is always back, because it always allows you to get the correct vision on the ball to understand where it's going to go. Yeah. If you run right into it off the bat, then you lose the trajectory of the ball. But if you take that step back, it gives you the correct trajectory, so you're able to make a right decision on where to step. And that is what we got to do as leaders. When the negativity comes, take that step back, hold yourself for just a second, think through it, and you'll be able to then see what's the trajectory of this that's coming at me. Is it coming, it may sound negative. It may sound like it's trying to attack me or bring me down. But 99% of the times, especially the people around you, they're around you for a reason. They love you. They care for you. And a lot of times it's just, you got to weed through the negativity and take the positive out of it.
This came to my head. So don't give too much energy to the negative, and always put in action to the positives. I love that step back concept, and then adjust, and then you go get the ball.
There you go.
Number 2, and this is a crazy one, okay? Because when you talk to leaders, it's like, okay, you're confident. I get it, right? But how did you get there, right? People have that impression of leaders. And so number 2 is confidence development. Can you think of a time where maybe you lacked confidence, or the lack of confidence kept you from doing something? And then how do you manage your confidence now? Because you speak in front of a lot of people, you lead big teams, and many teams, that requires confidence. Yeah. So what can you tell someone who maybe is struggling with it, or someone who has, here we go, too much of it?
So the understanding of confidence is a lot of times skewed, right? And especially how you opened up, it's so true that there's a misunderstanding about a leader thinking that they have, this kind of confidence that maybe is a natural confidence or those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But what happens is it's not so much a confidence as an assurance. And what I mean by that is you've been through this before as a leader. So you know how things are going to turn out. You can anticipate some of the things that are going to happen. You planning around different elements that you already know that are going to arise. So these are things that give you assurance, right? Now, of course, if you've never been somewhere before, when you're stepping into new zones, like I feel like with something that is relevant now, there's a assurance not in yourself, but an assurance in God. I created this word back when I was a youth pastor. I call it Godfidence, right? And that's not a confidence in yourself. That's a confidence in God.
Got it.
And so that to me is where us as leaders, we need to walk in, especially in unsure territory, in places of, that we've never stepped even ourselves before. But if you have, as a leader, stepped into places before, if you have, led new teams or created new processes or done new systems, then you have a little bit of experience under your belt, and you can use that as an assurance. So that contributes to the confidence, right, that you can have as a leader. Now, if you have the wrong kind of confidence, the confidence that comes from, just thinking highly of yourself, and you're always very prideful, and you're, kind of always tooting your own horn, and, it comes from a place of intelligence, of awareness. You have a skill set, but just always be worried. That God always does humble the prideful, and pride is definitely one of the things that God does not enjoy. He does not favor those kind of things. They will come to an end, and God will humble us. He'll level that playing field, and so we gotta be aware of that and understand that, hey, everything that we have. All the confidence that we might have, all the assurance that we might have, all comes from Him. And if we can keep that straight, then we know that God has our steps ordered, and everything's going to turn out okay.
Whenever I talk about confidence, I always like to tell people, know who you are, right? And show that person. And a person that isn't confident, they'll start copying or emulating something else. So it might be super aggressive or super controlling. And it's like, no, that's not who you are. Yeah. And so awareness, I love that you kind of touched that on a little bit. Just know who you are, know who God is. And it really does help in the confidence. And so, so do you consider yourself a confident person?
I don't.
No? I can't tell.
Yeah.
It seems like I don't believe you.
Yeah. No, yeah, I don't. I feel like there's an assurance in the information that I have, that I hold, so it's like I kind of know that this is right.
Be prepared, in other words. Like know what you're doing, and then there you go.
Right. So there's a trust in the rightness of what should happen, but as far as a confidence in myself per se,
But I like it. Yeah. I mean, I guess because you can have a blind confidence and not knowing, not being prepared.
Right.
So I like it. If you want to exercise your confidence, maybe you're lacking preparation. Maybe you're lacking the knowledge needed to step into it.
Absolutely. I'll tell you something. So when I first started preaching, I would preach to myself, my wife, my kids for hours before I ever preached, or spoke on stage. So even here at the church, when I first started getting opportunities to share with Pastor, I would come in the middle of the night and I would preach the whole entire sermon at least 3 times before I actually stepped on stage on that Sunday. Now it's different. Now I don't have to go through that regiment because I've already kind of become, like you said, I have an awareness of who I am, of how things are delivered, those kind of things. And I still run it through, I still speak it to my kids and to my wife, they're always going to be my first audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just things over time, they begin to develop, they begin to change. And so you start at a place of lack of confidence, but then you end up in a place in assurance, where you know how to deliver.
It's like the confidence comes from what you've done, not confidence doesn't come from what you think you're going to do. It's backwards.
Yeah.
Number 3, problem solving. I believe that anyone that's developing and wants to do great things in life, they're going to come across a lot of things that have to have adjustments. And they can't let the things that go wrong kind of shut them down or cause them to turn away and not commit or not do.
Yeah.
How do you, what kind of problems do you see in your day-to-day or organizationally, and how do you handle it? Do you have tactics? How's your mindset during these testing times?
Well, the thing is that problem solving is what separates the men from the boys. So,
and the girls from the women.
And the girls from the women. So that right there is literally whenever...
It's a game changer.
It's a game changer. Whenever there's a problem, everybody looks to the leader of the room. And that leader may not even have the title. There might be a titled person already in the room, but we're not looking to them because they're not the real leader. In the midst of problems, the real leaders arise. And those are the people that you turn to in the midst of those problems. And so now problem solvers, people that are problem solvers, are naturally become leaders. They're not titled people. They naturally become influencers because in the midst of the problem, they're able to problem solve. Now, in order to problem solve, there's a few requirements. You have to have creativity. You have to have innovation. You have to have, some type of skill to base on, experience. So it's just a mixing pot of different things that come together to help you to solve a problem. And so now here's the coolest part of this is that all of us are made with these different components in different ways. So what that means is that naturally the leader, even though he may not himself know how to solve the problem, he will know how to navigate the team to get to a place where the problem is solved. So what that means is, for example, if there was a problem in math, I could probably help you. But if there's a problem with literature, I'm probably not the guy. But I, as a leader, would know enough to be able to bring in the person that, writes really well, has studied, maybe has a degree, and, bring in that person to help us along the way. Them themselves may not have the confidence to lead the team, may not have the skill sets to lead a group of people, but I am there to help through that, and I will navigate us together to solve that problem. So that being said, problem solving is so essential to a leader. Now, how do you learn that? Well, there's different ways you can be thrown into the fire as a leader, but the way that most people learn how to become a leader and problem solve is by watching others. You got to watch. You got to learn from people's mistakes. When people make mistakes, you got to learn. You got to calculate. You got to put it down in your mental memory. You got to put it down on paper if you have to. And you learn from those mistakes. And so whenever you make a mistake, that's the best thing that could ever happen to you. Yeah. Because when you make a mistake, then you say, man, I should have did this different. And you become, if you're not a problem solver, what happens is you keep repeating that same mistake because you never solve that problem.
So it's like an indicator.
It's an indicator.
Yeah.
If you keep making the same mistake, you're not a problem solver. And you got to change that. You got to understand, okay, I made that mistake again. How do I fix this problem, right?
Yeah.
And so there it is. And so it will begin to, it's going to show its head again until we fix it. And so those are the things that get on repeat in our lives. And until we deal with them and solve that problem, then we would always continue to have that. And so problem solving is just so important as a leader. And a lot of it comes with, the beginning points of it is understanding that there is a problem, and then how do we navigate through that problem? It's not easy. It's really not, but it does take an awareness of yourself. It takes an awareness of where you're at, who you are, who the leader is in the room, and how you can help and assist in that. So problem solving is pretty legit. I think that was my favorite so far, number 3.
You like it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, here's a good CLP insight, and I got it from what you were saying. So I want to share this to everyone. This is a good one. Here it goes, and I'm going to put it on Instagram and Facebook and everything. I put someone's problem may give you the opportunity to step into your leadership. This is for those becoming leaders. So thank you very much. Okay, next one. Key number 4: communication development. Man, people, whenever I talk about this part, people are like, let me be proper. Let me make sure I put my periods and commas. Again, when you know yourself, you're going to communicate your way. Now, we can tweak and make the way we communicate better, but it's knowing your voice, right? So you're a great communicator. I've seen you do it so many times. Maybe you can help us by when you struggled as a communicator, and then how you've developed into the communicator that you are today.
Yeah. The question you always got to ask yourself when you're communicating is, who am I communicating to? Because it's not about what you're saying and how you're saying it, how it comes out of you. It's more about how the person is listening and how the person is going to receive, right? So, obviously, if you're talking through a podcast, right, you have to be very descriptive with your words. You have to kind of tell the story. You have to, watch your inflections and your, dynamic of your volume and your, those are the things that are important when you just have voice to work with. But if you also have visuals, if you also have, other things to your advantage, then you can rely on the other things to help out. You can have a slideshow, you can have a video, you can have things to contribute to the creativity of what you're delivering. And so now another thing is that when it's communication, I think repetition is one of the best tools that you can use in order to communicate. So when you repeat, you don't have to repeat it the exact same way, but you can repeat it in different ways so that you can make sure that the point lands. Now, another super important rule for communication is always follow up. Now, there's follow up in different ways. It looks different in different ways, but one of the ways is just to ask, so do you understand what I'm saying? Just asking that question. Or what do you think I meant when I said? Or those kind of things. You follow up whatever you said with some type of question to see if the other person understands. And if that person is saying something different, they probably don't understand.
Got it.
And you have
to adjust. You got to adjust.
You got to adjust how you're communicating. Oh, okay. So let me say it a different way. Or let me tell it in a story, what have you. And so I'm reading a book right now called Why Are We Yelling? And it's such a good book, but one of the things that's super important that it talked about, and I was like, it was an aha moment for me, hopefully for you as well, is that sometimes we talk to different parts of each other in our conversations, and this one's called, it's directly dealing with arguments, but there's different places. And so one is there's the reference of the mind, there's the heart, and the hands. So the mind is into the intellect, right? So this is when we're going to be arguing or discussing facts, right? The heart is how we feel. It's our emotions. It's our soul. It's those kind of things. So when we're talking to somebody as far as in their person, in their value, in their importance, in those kind of things. And then when we're talking to the hands, we're talking to their utility. Like it's the how and it gets done. It's the process. It's the system. It's those kind of things. And so sometimes we're communicating with people and we're telling them the utility of it. We're talking about the hands. We're talking about the process. and they are interpreting it as the heart. Well, am I not important enough to do the other job, or and it gets missed. And so those things we have to be aware of also as much as possible, to be able to interpret, hey, that person's not really hearing me. They're hurt by me. How did I hurt them? I'm just telling them how to make a pizza.
Yeah.
How did they get hurt?
Got it.
It's because in somewhere along the way, however you said something, when it transferred from a utility conversation, a hand conversation, into a heart conversation, a value or an influence conversation. And so those are things that you got to be aware of in communication. And so there's so many pieces to communication, but it's always very good practice to ask questions, to find out what their understanding of on how you communicate, so that way you can communicate a little bit better. And it goes back to the way we were problem solving is like, am I going to put the time in order to get better at this?
Yeah.
Am I going to continue to improve my communication, or am I just going to tell them, hey, you just have to understand me. This is the way I communicate. And that's not good for anybody.
I'm going to reference the book in the description below.
Sure.
Why Are We Yelling, right? And I'll find the author and I'll put it down there.
It's author Buster Benson.
Buster Benson. Dude, I love that. That was amazing. So I got 3 takeaways, and they all connect. And that is, who are you communicating? Why are you communicating with them? And then ask and verify.
Yeah.
So ask and verify are together, and they'll kind of help you, because people have a hard time figuring out, well, what do I say to this group? What do I say in this instance? Know the who and the why, and that'll help you in your delivery. Mm-hmm. Okay, key number 5. This is a fun one. Goal setting, right? You got to have a path if you want to accomplish anything in life. And so if you are a leader, goal setting is essential. Whether you know it, either way, you got to learn it. Yeah. If not, you're going to stun your growth. You might not see progress. How do you implement goal setting?
So goal setting for me is still something that I'm developing. I definitely, I want to preface.
And I love that you say that, because a leader's never finished developing.
Right.
He's always growing.
Yeah.
So,
but I do feel like it's one of the areas that I have probably the longest to go. But I have learned this, and I can share, is that goals definitely, they have to be written down. They have to be voiced. They have to be understood. But how you get there can always change. That a lot of times is what throws leaders off course, because they're so set in the way that they wanted to get to that goal, that when something happens that blocks that, or that, gets in the way of that, or maybe doesn't, it just, well, I have to shut down. I can't, I have to, it's not going to work out. And we tend to close down. We get negative really fast about those situations. And so in goal setting, the goal is the goal, but how we get there can be changed.
Yeah.
Now, it's also very wise, and this is another thing that I've been able to learn too, is that when you're setting your goals, as small as you can break down that goal, the better, right?
Yeah.
And if you can break that down into little tasks, into daily tasks, then those little tasks are not as daunting as the big goal. One of the things that, for example, I meet with my teams every third Sunday of the month, and I started out with 4 or 5 groups, 4 or 5 teams, and now I have 21 to 25 teams, and I say that it sounds like, what, you 21 or 25? Which one is it? It's because I have some leadership in the teams that are leaders over other teams, so that the direct reports are 21, but the overall teams are 25. So hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, so what happened is at the beginning of the year, and this has already been 2 years, we're almost on 3 years now that we're going on these meetings. There was a few things that I wanted to instill. One of them was unity, right? And so unity is so vague, it's so big, it's so broad. But it's a goal. It was a goal of mine because there was a lot of just separation, some division, discourse that was happening amongst the teams, and it was a lot of pointing fingers and different things. And so we had to bring this whole thing together. So over a year's time, my intention was to bring these teams together. So not only did we bring each other together with our meetings, but we we're then forced to open up about our teams. We're forced to communicate, to team build, to work together. And through all these smaller tasks that were happening at these meetings, we were able to achieve the bigger task that was to create unity across our teams. Now, some of us, we're like, what? I don't understand that. Why would you need to create? Because your team's already unified. But there's other of you that know exactly what I'm talking, because the people on your team will not work together, or they're, angry at each other, or those kind of things. And so when I say something like that, you know how big of a job that is, but it can be done. And I'm going to tell you, it took about a whole year to be able to get to that level, but it was done. And the thing is just not giving up, knowing that it's going to take time. Every opportunity that you get, you keep pointing back to that goal, and you just kind of do your best to not lose sight of what the goal was.
So if you see there in the keys, number 6 is next, right? Number 6 is dreaming big, but I put number 5 there intentionally, and then you caught it. You said it just naturally that you set smaller goals in order to reach the big goal. So I wrote unity as the big goal, and then before unity, it was like the small goals were have the meetings, have the plan, and don't give up, manage the teams.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you can use that example if you want, but dreaming big is so key. But sometimes people put the dreaming big before the goal setting, and it can throw them off path. Like your small goals need to track to your big goal, right? Yeah. So when you hear the thought or you hear dreaming big, what comes to mind? How do you see it in your leadership walk?
Well, dreaming big is really just listening for, to me, right? This is my thought. It's listening for what God has designed you for, and so some of us, it's super unclear. I know for many years I would pray to God, and I'm just like, God, why don't I have a vision for my life? Why don't I have one of those big dreams like I hear people all the time have, for their lives? Why is it not me? And so I've come to the understanding that now his big dream for me is not so much I'm gonna build this big church, or I'm gonna, eradicate homelessness in Fort Worth. Like, it's not one of those kind of things. It's the ability, it's the desire to develop people and to love people. And so that right there is a big dream, because it takes so much, and Sam knows this. I mean, it's hard work to love people. It's hard work to lead people. It's hard work to develop people. But that's what I've set my heart to do, and that's the dream that I have, is that there'll be people all along the way in my life that I've been able to pour into, to be able to develop and to lead. And it was something that was realized later in my life, but I didn't understand that it was something that was mimicked for me. It was something that I observed even when I was young, because my parents were just that. My parents were pastors in the north side of Fort Worth, a smaller church, but they were developing people left and right, leadership. People were coming through our church that became our youth pastors, or they became our worship leaders, or different things, and they would eventually be sent out, and they would start churches here in Fort Worth and start churches all over Texas and all over America. And these people were leaders, and they were developed, and they were challenged, and they were loved, and they were, all these things at the church. And so I was able to observe that, and I didn't understand at the time, but I was naturally being placed this dream in my heart to be able to be a person that would love others so much, that would care for their future, for their goals, for their leadership, and develop them and send them out as well.
Dude, like, just the fact that your parents had that leadership role in your life, and you got to see it, that it's so important for either, like, for people becoming a leader or being a better leader. You gotta have good influence. Like, you gotta have people that are actually doing it, and do what you can to get near them, and just, that's how you learn, is by watching and observing. Key number 1 through 6, it's kind of like a self thing. That's like becoming, having awareness, developing these little skills that are necessary as you become a leader. And that's why they track the way that they do. In the next 3, you'll see what happens. So this, like, the first 6 were becoming, the next 3 are being more of being a leader, getting closer to your leadership role. Yeah. And so the next one, number 7, is being a team player. Yeah. Every great leader, I don't care how great you are, you're either going to be leading a team, leading an organization, but nothing gets done outside of a team dynamic. What have you learned about managing teams, the dynamics of teams? What insights have you caught on? And
yeah. That one's so big.
I know. And
it's a big one. But so, I'm going to try to just give a few little nuggets here. So number 1 is just in being a team player is just knowing what you have to offer, right? Is bringing all your resources, bringing all your tools to the team and saying, here, I can do this, right? In order to be a true team player, you have to be able to bring it and say, how do you guys want to use it? Not how do I want to use this? Like, like even being a baseball player, right? So we go back to the baseball reference. If you know that you can hit well, you're like, no, you need to put me in the cleanup spot. I'm going to bring everybody home. I'm going to hit the home run. Da, da, da. But maybe that's not the best place for you. Maybe you need to be the lead hitter, or maybe you need to be number 5 after the other cleanup hitter. Like, it's just like you got to know what you have to offer, the tools that you have. The rules of the game, that and the things that you bring to the table. But at the same time, you got to be able to say, and how do we want to use that? And it's a collective decision. It's not, I'm going to be used like this, guys. And if you don't use me like this, I'm off the team. That is not a team player. A team player is somebody that offers their resources, offers their skill sets, but says, how can this benefit us collectively, right? Now, that's number 1. Number 2, and this is what I've learned like through like more different years in leadership, is understanding that our roles change, and then understanding that the way that you utilize your roles can be used in a different way. And so what I mean by that is that at one point you might have been the player, right? But in another phase of your life, you might be the coach. Yeah. And so even though you can probably still swing the big stick, right? And you can still get the ball over the fence, but you are more of an asset to the team, coaching other people on how to hit than just your single bat. And that right there can change the dynamic of the whole team, and you become a winning organization than just having a good batting average for yourself. And so that right there will change everything. So understanding that roles can change and that your role can have benefits in different ways. And so team player is all about knowing that.
John, you've given us great insight from your firsthand experience of being a leader. We have 2 more keys to go. Number 8, time management. What are your thoughts? What have you learned? Yeah. Everyone struggles with this, right?
Yeah.
So how do you handle it?
Well, there's 2 sides to it. Number 1 is you always can get better, right? It's definitely something that you never stop improving in is time management. Whenever you're able to schedule yourself, to put yourself in sections of time, you're building a schedule. And in order for you to lead others, you have to be able to lead yourself, right? And if you can't put yourself on a schedule, then we will never be able to work with a team with a deadline.
Well, okay, let me ask you. So you say schedule. So this is more on the practical side. Is there an app? Is there a way you schedule? Do you do it on your phone, laptop? Do you write it down on, with a pen and paper?
So for me, I'm more of a technical guy, so I use kind of Google, Google Calendar, Google Apps, those kind of things. So there's definitely a lot of things there. We use project management apps. We use communication apps. So I like a lot to utilize, because with Google I have my family calendar, I have my wife's scheduled calendar, I have my scheduled calendar, I have my church calendar, my office calendar. So there's a lot of different calendars.
So there's a lot of balancing there.
Well, it's just understanding that you play a role. Like I think to me the most important part of time management is understanding that you are important not only to yourself but to other people.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a leader, right? And if you choose to not allow other people's lives to play a part in your planning and your time management, then I wouldn't say that you are a leader. I think
Yeah.
you're just walking by yourself.
Got it.
Right?
And so it's so crazy that when you mentioned all the different things that you're managing, whenever people step into their leadership in the beginning, everything goes to their leadership, and then the family and fun and refreshing your mind, all that is out the window. Did you ever have a time like that? And when did you come to finding a better balance in your leadership?
Absolutely. I would say that, just to kind of give people insight, definitely when I was a youth pastor, my wife and mentioned to me, hey, I never see you. You always,
Yeah.
But those were times where I'm like praying 4 or 5 hours at the church, preparing in the word, so like I felt like I was holy, right? Like I was like doing the Lord's work, but I was losing my family along the way, and that was not right. It wasn't right. And so, and it was definitely a misplaced understanding. I felt that is, and this is something that we can all learn, is that I felt like that the salvation of my students was based on overloading of work that I did to myself, like the sacrificing of myself. But the truth is that their salvation is based in Christ, and what He did has nothing to do with me. I'm a messenger. I'm a vessel. I'm an instrument, and I'm going to do my best. But whenever you're losing your first church, your first place of ministry, which is your family, then it's not okay. It's not right. And so I had to learn that, right? And so that's time management, is understanding that, God comes first, right? But your family, your family's right there before ministry, before church, because, you can, and even the Bible says that what does it benefit a man to gain the whole world but to lose his soul? And we can put ministry in the wrong place, right? We got to put our family first. We got to put, our heart, our soul, our intimacy with God first before preaching to others. So for me, time management starts there singularly, is to understanding and being aware that you're not an island, you're not by yourself. You have to work with people. And then number 2 is the next level is, if you're going to work with others, right? Then at that point, you got to understand that there's a process. So number 1, the first piece of the process is the task. What do you got to do, right? And once you add time to task, that creates schedule, right? So task plus time equals schedule. Task plus time plus people, that's when you have a project, right? And so you have to understand that each element along the way, if you don't even know how to divide what you're doing into tasks, then you're not going to know how to set up a schedule. If you don't know how to set up a schedule, then you're not going to know how to do a project, because it involves other people, it involves a group. And so those are the different levels, and it's something that you have to learn over time. So, but the beginning point is understanding, hey, this thing that we're trying to accomplish, it has tasks. Okay, what are they? Great. Okay, how do I assign a time to the task? All right, cool, I made a schedule. How do I assign a person to a schedule? Oh, great, now I created a project. So that's good. It's just it's super basic, but that's how we can improve in everything that we're doing.
Key number 9. This is my favorite one. Just give us your general thoughts. Maybe you just have something you just read, or something that really helps you in your leadership, or maybe a tough lesson you learned, or a great lesson that you learned. What is a leadership truth to you?
Yeah. One of the things that I always say is that you always have a seat at the table if you're willing to do things that nobody else would do. And I feel like people think that that's some kind of secret sauce, or some type of, like it's a special revelation that you have to know. It's simple. Like, if you're willing to do something that somebody else was not willing to do, then you always have a place. If you're willing to do something that somebody else doesn't want to do, you always will have a business. You always will have some type of enterprise. You'll always have some type of connection. People will want you. People will desire you. People will need you. I remember learning that early when I was starting to play bass, right? Everybody loves the drums. Everybody wants to be the lead singer. Everybody likes guitar, the keyboard. These are all positions, but nobody likes the bass, because the bass is not like a glorious instrument. The bass is not where you get solos all the time. The bass is not where you get to, have the beat on the drums. The bass is what the bass is to tie the rhythm to the music. That's the job of the bass, right? So it's more of the job than it is about going off and doing your own thing and shining light on yourself. But once I became a bass player, I automatically became so in demand, because everybody needs a bass player, because dime a dozen are the guitar players, dime a dozen are the drummers and the keyboard players, right? Everybody. And the singers, let's look for a singer. But the bass player, there's never enough bass players. And so if you know how to play bass, you're always going to be in the band. And I learned that early. And so if the same thing applies in leadership, the same thing applies in your business. If you're willing to pick up poop, I guarantee you somebody wants to pay you to do it. Somebody wants to pay you to do it. And if you can develop that into a business and turn that over into something else, somebody will pay you to create your business of picking up poop. And that's just, and there is businesses out there that do that, you know? And so what I'm trying to say is this, is that, and it's just a leadership thing, you know? If you want to be at the table, continue to offer yourself. Remember, we talked about the team player. What do I have? Here are the resources that I can bring. These are the skill sets that I have. How can I help the overall goal? How can I help everybody win? How can I help you guys without giving me glory, without having, anything tied to it? Oh, you got to use me this way or that way, or don't put me over here, or don't put me over there. No, let all that go. And if you're willing to be used and do the things that nobody else will do, because sometimes we are the best, we could be the best batter, right? We go back to those baseball analogies, but maybe they just want you to shag the balls. What if they just want you to, and pick up trash, clean the toilets? Are you willing to do that? I mean, it's up to you, and I know that there's self-worth and self-value and different things that come along the way. But I mean, if you're worth your salt, you'll get elevated really, really quick. You'll begin to, people will notice you right away. And so that's right there. I mean, obviously if people can't notice you for doing a good job cleaning a toilet, and like give you praise for that, then I don't know what, you got to start somewhere. And even, like we all have skill sets. You might be a good artist. You might be a good, orator. You might be able to read well, those kind of things. But what I'm trying to say is like, you got to commit to something and do something right. And there's going to be a point, even in those things that you like to do, that is going to require something that you don't want to do to be able to get to the next level. And if you can't push through that, then you're never going to make it.
Gary Vee uses this analogy of clouds and dirt, and he's like, get your head out of the clouds and get your hands in the dirt. Get to work.
Good.
It's such a great quality for any leader, whether you're being developed or you are a leader. Thank you so much for coming on CLP. This is a great conversation, man. Yeah. Thank you so much. I know it's going to help a lot of people. And if you're listening right now, thank you for tuning in. Visit our website at CultivateLeadershipProject.org, and on there you can find our podcast. You can donate. You can support us. You can subscribe when you're listening. Leave a review. We're trying to spread the word. We're trying to just bring some positive energy into this world, and so continue to help us do that. And Jonathan, obviously, let me give a plug to Refuge Church in Fort Worth. The website is refugefw.org. If you're looking for a church, this is a great spot to come. And any last thoughts? Anything?
No, I love you. Keep listening to these podcasts, man. Sam's awesome. He's amazing. Don't give up.
We'll see y'all on the next one.